But today, we're going to start talking about your advertising plan on what you're doing. Now, as I'd mentioned to you in a previous class, now the last class, if you remember, we talked about your promotion plan. And this class is about your advertising plan. Very, very similar. The way that I split the two is that I look at promotion plan as something that's free or pretty close to free. And I look at advertising as things that you spend money for. So a telephone call, free, right? Sending an email, free overall. So sending out a news release, it's not free, but a stamp costs 50 cents. So it's close to free. Those are all promotion ideas. Advertising, on the other hand, can be expensive. So if we were talking about advertising on television or advertising on the radio or buying a billboard or the side of a bus, it's going to cost. So that's the difference between the two plans. So while you're working on your promotion plan, the idea is to think of your strategy of things that are free or close to free for promoting the artist or the artist products. Now you can start thinking about, okay, well, what other kinds of advertising do I want to do that maybe doesn't come across as being free and things that I might have to pay for? It's a good idea to think of the plan anyway. And as we've always stated in this course, is that think of the perfect world. So maybe you're not ready for advertising now, but the plan is to buy ads, to do this or that. So the smart move is to plan on your advertising. So section 9 of your artist business plan is all about your advertising. And then there's certain things within your advertising plan that you need to address. And if you look at this list, they're very similar to your promotion plan. So within this list, you have an advertising budget, you have your advertising mix, you have objectives, you have your advertising online, you are talking about your potential, you're also looking at your strategies, your co-op advertising, any creative talent that you might have working with you, and your offline advertising. And once again, you're going to wrap it all up, you're going to condense it, and you're going to put it into your advertising plan overview at the end. So let's just kind of think about what's going on with your advertising, okay? So the very first thing and the very base level is your advertising strategy. Now, we're going to get into more about strategy in just a minute, but this is really the process of what goes on within your advertising plan. So you have to think about your strategy. Okay, so that might be the message that the advertisers gives to solve a communication-related problem. For example, maybe you're advertising because you have a show coming up and you want your fans to know so that they can go buy a ticket. If they don't know, that's a problem. So this solves a problem. That's a communication problem. Advertising lets the fans know about a new release or a new merchandise item or a new ticket to a show or a tour. It basically helps with the communication. And then the second thing is that the idea that the advertisers select for communicating the strategic message in a creative way. So you might have the tickets available for a show, but you just don't say, hey, tickets available. Maybe you want to be a little bit more creative. You come up with something that's newsworthy of why a fan might come to the show. Hey, you've been locked up for a year behind a mask. Come on out to our show. That's a strategic message. It's kind of like putting it back into the court of the fan and giving them a reason. Okay? So that's the big idea. And then you look at the creative execution. And this deals with the forms of advertisement like the story, the script, the word, coloring, those kind of things that to be used in order to make the point come across through your communications. And then finally, your tactics, the short-term decision about specific tangible tasks related to advertising method and media. So we're going to do this much on radio, we're going to do this much in direct mail, or we're going to do this much on a billboard, or we're going to buy some TV spots, or however it is that you're going to use your communication and put it into a tactic. So what we need to think about is your strategy. We'll go back to that. Okay, developing your advertising strategy. So we've got two different things. One of them is, what's the message? Tickets? Are you selling a new download or selling a new t-shirt? I mean, I don't know. What's the message? And then selecting the media that the message will be used on. Two different things. So one of them is the message, and the second one is the media that the message is going to be used. So it might be radio, it might be the internet, it might be television, it might be, say, billboards or those kind of things. So what's the message, and then what's the media used? So in your plan, you're going to say the strategy for our advertising is that we're going to come up with a message for each of our products, or each of our gigs, or each of our whatever, and then we're going to figure out a way to place it in certain media. And maybe your plan is to buy radio time, or maybe it's going to be to buy television time. I don't know. It's up to you. And maybe say, well, we're going to see how the promotion plans works. This is going to be part of our strategy. And then if we see that we need advertising, then we'll put that into our plan as a backup. Okay, so now you need to think about objectives. Okay, and as I'd mentioned to you about objectives, always try and set a date of when the objectives are coming due. This pushes you a little bit. All right, so you're going to set some objectives, and maybe you want to say, well, we have a show, let's say May 1st, and so we want to have our advertising kick off April 1st, and we're going to advertise for a month before every show that we do about a particular show. And then maybe another show and you do a month out from that, and another show and you do a month out from that. So, and maybe you can put them together with a cooperative kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so within that month of April that you're going to be promoting your May show, perhaps you have to think about what the budgets are going to be. Well, for this show, we expect to make, I don't know, $2,000. Okay, that's great. How much are you going to put into advertising to make the $2,000? Well, I wouldn't think you're going to spend $1,000 to make $2,000. That might not be such a smart decision. So you got to think about your budget. Perhaps you want to spend $100, $200, $250 into your budget decisions. And when we get into finance, we'll talk a little bit more about budgets. But you have to think about a budget with your ads, because I'd mentioned to you, advertising is something that costs. And then we get back to those two decisions. What's the message, and what media are you going to use for that message? And maybe you want to tweak it a little bit. Maybe you can say, okay, we're going to buy advertising on 2 different radio stations. On one of the radio stations, our message is going to be different than our message on the second radio station. So you make your media decisions of 2 different radio stations, but your message is different on each one, and then you can evaluate to find out which one was better. So if someone comes to the show, maybe you have someone taking a survey, which is something I do recommend that you think about. Taking a survey of the people that come in. How'd you hear about the show? Oh, on this radio station. You just mark a little check mark. Oh, I heard about it on this other radio station. Another little check mark. And that'll help you with your evaluations on how people heard about the show. Oh, a friend told me about it, or I saw the thing online, or whatever it is. And that way you can evaluate the advertising. Okay, and then what's your potential? Okay, I've already mentioned quite a few of the potential, but think about the potential of your ads? Well, let's start off with Scene Magazine or a magazine in general. So it might be a good choice as to something maybe that's a national magazine for a local show, not a good choice, not related to entertainment. You don't want to be advertising in a food recipe magazine necessarily on a national scale for a local show. It just doesn't make sense. So your potential is something that's going to be attracted to this. So you're going to look at your customers. Where do they hear about shows? You should know this. You've done some research on your customers. If they do it in Scene Magazine, or if they listen to the radio, or how do they find out about it? So your potential by looking at what your customers will pay attention to. Okay, so let's just go back to Scene Magazine as the idea. So if you have a show May 1st and you want to advertise all the Wednesdays in April, you have to count them up and say, okay, we've got these many Wednesdays, and perhaps you want to buy a small ad at the beginning, maybe an eighth of a page. Okay, maybe two ads are a quarter page, and maybe one of the quarter pages is actually the page cut in quarters, and maybe it's the outside right corner. I like the right side better than the left side. When people flip through it, they can see the ad, where if they have to pull the page all the way open to see the ad on the left side, I particularly enjoy the right side. And not only that, I like the upper right side. So when I'm advertising, that's where I try and place my ads, on the top of the page. And when the magazine is open, I want it to be on the right side. Okay, well, what about a column that's a quarter of a page? Okay, that's another possibility. Once again, my preference, and everyone's different, but my preference, take the column on the outside of the page on the right, so that if you're flipping through it, you can see it all the way down the right-hand side of the page, and that could be a quarter page ad. Okay, and maybe the last week you want to buy a half a page ad. Now, maybe you want it half a page on the upper side or the lower side. Maybe you want a half a page on the left or the right. It doesn't matter. I prefer the upper, once again, and I prefer the right side. So depending on the size of the ad that I'm buying, I'm either going to place it on the upper side or on the right side. And that's, if the magazine is open, I like the page on the right. So this is just the way that I do things. Maybe it's not something for you. Okay, well, what other kind of potential is there? What about television? Well, sure, television's available, but even better, in my perspective, would be cable. You get a different crowd, you get a different audience sometimes, and you can pick the shows that might fit a little bit better than some of the national television programming can be very expensive. You can buy local cable for a lot less than you can buy television. So something to consider on that end, because maybe your audience, your fans, or the artist fans that you've identified, watch certain programs. Well, you might be able to pinpoint those on cable and buy it through the local cable station instead of through the television station. Now, most people have some sort of cable now, and it's not all broadcast. Not everybody, but certainly a lot of people use cable. And so you might be, if you want to buy on channel 3, 5, or 8 on cable, you can do that. And it's the same results. So if you wanted to buy a national show, you might be able to buy it through the cable station, but you for sure be able to buy it through the local affiliate, and however that's going to work. So something to consider. And keep in mind that when you're buying time, a lot of times you might be able to ask them to say, hey, if I buy 10 spots, can I get one for free? Or can I get a discount because I'm buying in bulk? I'm not just buying one ad one time. It's not cost effective to do that. It's better to buy in bulk. And the same with radio. If you're buying radio time, you can buy in bulk. You want to look at what radio stations would be attractive to your fans, and then maybe buy a couple spots at the beginning of the month, increase the amount in the middle, and then really hit them hard the last week of the show. So maybe you want to start off with 5 ads a week or 10 ads a week, get into 15 or 20 or 30, and then the last week you want to hammer them with 25 ads or 50 ads or whatever it is that you're going to buy. A little note here I want to tell you about that I found that works for me is that a lot of my audiences or the clients that I represent, if I'm coaching them on this, and I know COVID has changed this a little bit, but hopefully it'll get back to this. The ad rates after 12 o'clock at midnight can be very inexpensive. I used to buy ad rates after 12 for $5 a spot. And what can happen is because nobody wants those spots. All the major advertisers don't want it after 12 o'clock because they think their clientele's all in bed. But when we think about some of our clientele, they might be coming home from the clubs. So they might be tuning into the radio. So it's a different audience than the radio's typical, Monday morning drive time audience. But if you buy time after midnight, for example, on a Saturday morning at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and Sunday morning at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, you might attract a whole different audience, and it might be significantly cheaper for you to do it that way. So something to consider. If you want to buy drive time, either in the morning or in the afternoon, that's when the rates are the highest on radio. You have to consider that when you're looking at your budget, because I've seen ads on very popular radio stations in the morning that a 30-second ad could go for $500, $600, $700. It's not uncommon. And if you've got the budget to do that, that might work for you if that's your audience. If it's not your audience, why are you spending the money on that when you can buy a lot more ads in less listened to times, but it's specific to your audience times? Something to consider. So this is the potential you have to think about. What kind of potential is in your market? Can you buy advertising on buses? Certainly in this market you can. Can you buy advertising on billboards? Can you buy advertising online? And we'll talk about online in just a minute. But these are some potential that you want to think about. So the plan is for our potential of advertising is to list the different genres. So maybe you want to start off with television and say, okay, my potential for television includes 3, 5, 8, 19, 43, 55, and then our cable possibilities are this, and this through Spectrum or Cox Cable or Time Warner or one of those kind of outlets. And then you say, okay, in the billboard, we're going to be either looking at Lamar or looking at Clear Channel to do that. If you're looking at radio, you can say my potential for radio is maybe I'm going to advertising on the style of music that the artist performs, or maybe there's a radio show that you like on college radio. Now, just be aware that college radio does not normally accept advertising. They call it underwriting. So the difference is that advertising is a pre-produced spot, where underwriting is that you give them money for them to talk about it. That's underwriting. So it's not a pre-produced spot. The disc jockey can get up and talk about the upcoming show and the value of it and why a fan would want to go and the music that's being played and so forth. That's underwriting. So you can donate money or you can give some money to the radio station and ask them to do some underwriting for you. It's a lot different than commercial radio station, which will sell you ads. So things to think about with blending your promotion and your advertising. And yes, that is potential. Okay, so let's talk about then your budget. Okay, so there's quite a different things. We're going to get more into budgets in your finance department or finance section of your artist business plan. But then there's different ways to think about this. So you can think about, okay, what's affordable? Well, how do you know this? Well, the budget can see it's based on what the company thinks it can afford. Well, come up with a budget saying, okay, well, I think I can afford to spend $500 on this event or the ticketing of this thing, or because I think I'm going to make a lot more money than that, and I think we can afford that. Okay, that's one way of coming up with the budget. How about percentage of sales or forecasted sales? So in my example earlier, when I said that the artist might forecast that they're going to bring in $2,000 worth of ticket sales, what's the percentage that they're willing to put into advertising? Well, if it's 20%, that's $400. You do the math. Okay, percentage of sales or forecasted sales. What are competitors? Radio station may give you a list, or you can listen to the radio station, which I would recommend that you do first. What are your competitors spending in their advertising? Now, we haven't gotten into competition yet, but we will on Thursday. And this is something that you have to pay attention to. What is the competition doing with their advertising? For local music, most local bands and local artists do not do major advertising. They do more promotion than they do advertising. But you got to be up to date. Who is advertising? When you see an ad in the newspaper or in Scene Magazine, or you hear an ad about something on the radio about an artist, it should perk up your ears. Who is this artist? Who's funding this? Do they have deep pockets? Is it because they're so popular they're making some money? What's the reason for this? Pay attention. Okay, and the last one is objective and tasks. So set your objectives, determine the tasks to achieve those objectives, and then sum the task cost to equal your budget. Yeah, it's a little bit more complex. So once you have your objectives, you can say, okay, we're going to try and sell, 500 tickets by May 30th, or let's say a week earlier, by April 23rd. And that way it's a sold out show. Okay, so we want to sell 500 tickets by April 23rd. And in order to do that, we need to come up with some tasks. So the tasks are advertising tasks. Okay, so we're going to buy print ads. We're going to do online ads. We're going to do some direct mail things. Okay. And then when you look at your task, you can add up how much all that's going to cost. Then you can look at that to be your budget. And you can say, whoa, that budget is way too high. I need to cut back on some of my tasks. Okay. You'll figure it out. It does take some time. It does take some effort. It's not that difficult, but you just have to do the work. Okay. All right, let's look at your advertising mix. And just like all the other mixes that we talked about your marketing mix, we talked about your promotion mix, and then we're going to get into your sales mix and some other things, and your products mix. Remember this? We talked about all the different types of mixes. And this is not an audio mix on your board, on your soundboard, okay? This is your mix of how your advertising dollars are going to be spread out. If you look at this chart, it kind of goes over the top for most, regional artists, because most likely they're not buying national television and they're not buying yellow pages and so forth. But just for an example, you can start to see what kind of mix is in the plan. So you want to say, okay, well, we're going to buy some magazines. We're going to buy some newspapers. We're going to do some direct mail. We're going to do some internet advertising. And we might buy some radio as well. So then, okay, so that's your mix. Maybe you want to include local television in there or cable. Then that becomes your mix. So what is the mix? How much of each one are you willing to do? Think about it. Put it into the plan. This is just real simple. You just have to think about, okay, we're going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. If you're going to do newspapers, think about all the different potentials for newspapers. You know, we got the Plain Dealer, we got the Sun Herald, we got the Call and Post, we got the Akron Beacon Journal, we've got the Lorraine Journal, we've got, you know, various different newspapers that you might want to consider, depending once again on where your fans and customers are paying attention. I would think that just on the realm of things and based on budgets for local and regional artists, you're going to do some advertising in Scene Magazine. You might do some advertising in Friday Magazine, which is in the Plain Dealer. But then you're going to think about internet advertising. That would be a good choice. And maybe if after you start collecting your fans and customers' addresses through your gigs, and maybe through they sign up on your website, you're going to be doing some more direct mail. Those are the ones that I'm anticipating that you're going to pick first for the artist. Okay, so what about co-op advertising? Okay, just like co-op promotion, it's cooperative. And so you can start thinking about, okay, so what is cooperative? So for example, when you get a gig at an event or a venue, always ask, okay, well, where do you do your advertising? Where does the venue do their advertising? Do they do direct mail? Do they do radio or television or print? Ask them if you can co-op with them so that they get more ads, but for each ad, you're mentioned in them as well. So it's not just them promoting their event or their venue, they're promoting you as being there as a part of it. So it's branding, 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 right? So co-op advertising works. Now this one is a 420 concert, and it says defining the 420 lifestyle, and it has to do with the venues, and looks at multiple venues here. Live entertainment, outdoor venue, general admission, 50,000 plus projected attendance, open ticketing sales opportunities, large booth or tent available. So it's an interesting concept. So if you buy into that, and let's say you get a gig at this event and you want to participate in this, you come to them and say, hey, do you do co-op advertising? We have a budget of this much money, and I know that you're advertising here, here, and here. Perhaps you could also fund some other things that we're doing because that's where our audience is. And we're going to do cooperative advertising. We co-op this. So something to consider when you're doing your advertising plan. The plan for cooperative advertising is, and whatever it turns out to be. Now, one of the examples I gave you about cooperative promotions in the last week was gig swaps. We talked about gig swaps, and one artist giving a gig to another artist and swapping dates. So the idea was to promote, it's co-promotion, where they come and play in the artist market that you're representing, and then you go play in their market that they're representing. What might happen with this is that you gain new fans in their market and they gain new fans in your market. Well, what about extending that further? Okay, so you did some co-op promotions. Now you want to think about co-op advertising. So you say, okay, well, what do you do for advertising? They say, well, we have a street team. Okay, well, what's the street team do? Well, they go to all the libraries and coffee shops and any place there's a bulletin board and puts our flyers up, and we pay them and we pay for their gas and pay for their lunch while they're out on the road, and maybe we could do that in a co-op way, so that in addition to them doing their advertising that way, the artist that you're representing wants to do it in this market. And maybe it's a new thing for them. So that'd be co-op. If you do street teaming in your market, we'll do street teaming in our market. And we'll put your name on our flyer and you put our name on your flyer. Back to branding, right? So these are some ideas. If they say that they buy radio, okay, ask them if if they'd be interested in placing your name on those radio spots. And then you might want to think about, okay, well, am I willing to buy radio here? Just remember, not all markets are the same. Some radio is expensive, some radio is not as expensive, but these are things that you have to think about. The thing that got my attention on this particular ad right here about 420 Concert Festival funding is the line right underneath it. It says $100,000 in sponsor co-op available. Wow. Okay. What does that mean? Well, that means that perhaps, let's just say they got 10 artists that are all in on this. Each artist is contributing $10,000 worth of, but each artist is getting $100,000 worth of branding. Oh, well, you might say, well, $10,000 is a lot. Well, okay, yes, it is. Well, maybe the venue's going to pay for half of it. Maybe the promoter is going to pay for some of this. So when I see that kind of line, my question goes up is how much do I have to pay to get in on that? And maybe it's not as much as you think. Maybe this says $100,000 worth of sponsor co-op advertising, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have to pay 1% or even 1% until you ask. But upfront co-op advertising to be very beneficial, especially if all the parties that are involved with the upcoming gig or release or so forth are working together on this. Okay, now creative talent. These guys are the ones that pretty much help you with radio or television. So if you go to a radio station and you say, I'd like to buy 20 spots or 50 spots or whatever it is that you're planning to buy, they'll say, okay, well, who's going to write your spot for you? And you might say, well, I'll write it. Well, you write what your message is in under 30 seconds? In 30 seconds, but so it's delivered in 30 seconds or less? It's branding, 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 branding. So what will happen is that the radio station will offer you some creative talent as a part of the sale. You usually don't have to pay for it. But the question here is whether or not the plan is for you to do your own writing of these spots or to use creative talent for that. And television, if you go into a television station and let's say you go to WJW channel 8 and you say, I'd like to buy 5 commercial spots on your station, they might ask you, okay, well, do you have someone to write the script? Do you have someone to deliver the message? Do you have some visuals to go along with it? And if you don't, can we hook you up with some of our creative talent so that we can make sure that you're effective? Because if your ad is effective, your chances of coming back to them to do more work has just gone up. So they want to be successful. They want you to make money and they want their ads to work for you. So you come back and buy more. If they don't work, you're out of there. You're going to evaluation. You're going to say, this didn't work. We're out. They want it to work because they want you to buy more ads. So they're willing to give you the creative talent to help you with the writing of those spots and the direction of those spots and how it's going to flow and to make sense and make sure you got the who, what, when, where, why, and how much included in your message. Okay. Offline advertising. All right, well, offline, gee whiz, take a look at Times Square. Ads everywhere, right? This is all offline. Offline would include, newspapers and billboards, and it's pretty much some of the things that we've just been discussing, television, radio, that's all offline. Now, does it spread to online? Well, potentially. If you buy something in the plain dealer, you might be able to swing a deal to say, hey, not only do I want it in the plain dealer, but I want it to be posted in cleveland.com. And since the plain dealer owns cleveland.com, it might work out for them as well as you, because now you get both outlets and you can buy it through, the plain dealer that might help you with your online. Plain dealer being offline and the cleveland.com being online. So something to think about. Look at your offline potential. Back to your potential. Here we go. Okay. So where are you going to advertise? How are you going to advertise offline? Put it in the plan. And then obviously online advertising. These are the two, offline and online. Those are the only two that there are. So where are you going to do this? Now we talked about promotion online, and that's great, especially through social media. You can advertise online too. And I think the story that I gave you had to do with Facebook and buying ads on Facebook. You can also buy and bid on ads. That's a bidding process, which is kind of neat the way they have that set up for Facebook and Google. So you can bid on keywords and you can bid certain amounts of dollars based on your budget. So you have to look at your online media outlets. Now, there are a lot of them, and some of them are more expensive than others. And there's ways that you can do this so that you can get the biggest for your buck, but you've got to kind of play the game. And you have to evaluate. Now, when I do online advertising, usually I do 5 to 10 different ads for the same message, only because I want to see which ones are working. And if they're not working, I pull them off. Next time, nope, not going to do it that way. I've learned. So don't forget about the who, what, when, where, why, and how much. All of those should be in all of your ads. And then think about how this is going to affect your online advertising through either search engines or social media sites or blogs, or however it is that you're going to attract the audience through the research that you've already done. Okay, so that's the overview for your advertising plan.